Hello, my name is Juzer Jangbarwala. I'm a chemical engineer and I have 15 or so patents in the chemistry field. I also have about 12 pending patents in the same fields. I was asked by Pandora to look into a product they are marketing, and the product is called LamiNine, and they've been testing the product with folks out there right now, and I've been receiving some phenomenal feedback. But I was asked to look at it from a more technical perspective, perhaps more like an engineering aspect rather than like a medical doctor. Perhaps the mechanisms of how these things are working and why these testimonials are creating such an excitement around. So I started looking at the product and looked at the way these chemistries might possibly be working to create the effects that we're seeing with the folks. The basic ingredient in LamiNine is a very interesting product, which is an extract of a 9-day incubated, fertilized chicken egg. What's the significance of the 9-day? That was my first question. So I looked at what is it that's in an egg that on the 9th day changes. And a lot of things change. As a fertilized egg, the egg is on a path to become a chicken. And during this stage, in the beginning of the blastodermal stage, as it's called, or proto-embryonic stage, all the cells are being structured so that organs would be formed, and most of them are in very thin skin layers. At day 9, everything is still a liquid, yet everything is ready to make the solid chicken embryo grow into a chick. So between day 10 and 11, the chicken embryo starts taking these peptides and amino acids, along with another factor which is present in most pro-embryonic or embryonic bodies of animals, most importantly in the placenta of a human mother, where there are stem cells and there are very critical ingredients. And one of those critical ingredients was found in the early 70s or the mid 70s to be called what is called the fibroblast growth factor. Fibroblast growth factor can be considered more like a director of taking these peptides and amino acids and putting them in the right combination wherever the embryo really needs it. So the first thing that goes into the embryo's solidifying body is the fibroblast growth factor, and then it sucks all the peptides and creates what we call life. And basically the chicken starts growing. And so the most optimum time to take this nutrition out of an egg, and it so happens that the fibroblast growth factor, the particular fibroblast growth factor that is in this egg that has been tested, of course there are many types of fibroblast growth factors, and probably most of them are in this liquid, but research shows us that a basic form of fibroblast growth factor 2 is seen to, they have tracked it down from day 9 to day 13, and it changes from the liquid to the solid. So that was the fundamental start of the formulation that makes up LamiNine. And we continue from that to look at what do short peptides and what do amino acids and what do they do for us as a human body. This is a chicken egg we're talking about. So during the research I found that very interestingly there are two schools of researchers. One is just researching the amino acids and the peptides and all those things and how they affect the brain. And the other research section that I saw was people who were just concentrating on the fibroblast growth factor. My attempt is to try to explain how these two things work together. It could be very simple to be able to check the end point, the final function of an amino acid or a peptide, because in these experiments, most of the times, in vitro experiments, the amino acid is fed right to the source, right to where you want it to do something, to the neuron or whatever. And that's okay, but between the time when you pop a pill, for lack of a better word, and the amino acid has the ability to travel through the acidic pathway of your stomach and all, it may not reach that end point in one piece, or even if it reaches, does it have the rest of the structures that are needed? Other components that we know are already there in this proto-embryonic stage fluids. Will they be there to repair or do any sort of nutrition for the neurons or for the brain in general? We don't really know that by themselves. So the approach that Pandura has taken has been to let's not guess and second guess nature. Let's see if whatever is in a confirmed fluid that for millions of years has been supporting life, has been creating life, has been making solid bodies out. Let's take that fluid and preserve it and freeze dry it. And let's start with that. And that's what I believe is the strength. There are millions of, maybe not millions, thousands of companies that will sell you specific amino acids. For example, my research showed that carnosine is very good for lesions, and carnosine is good for healing wounds, and so on and so forth, blood pressure regulation, recovering from a stroke, weight control, cortisol control. All these things really in the end are being controlled by either amino acids or amino acids reaching the right portion of your brain that gives the correct transmission, the correct stimulus to the right portion of your endocrine system, which is all your glands, and which are all where all the hormones are created. But if that was so simple, then we would see effects like what I've been told LamiNine users are showing all over the place, and certainly we don't. In fact, most of the medical community will hesitate to endorse, even though they know that in the end a particular neuron is nourished by a particular amino acid or a particular peptide. They are not sure if you take it as a pill, if it'll ever make it to that. So they will always tell you things like it couldn't hurt. So it is important then in the 1960s, in the early 60s, they discovered that within the brain, in the hypothalamus region, there's a whole bunch of, they discovered a lot of neural stem cells, which means that the brain is very focused on keeping itself, from an evolution standpoint, the brain wants to survive. And because it's a lot of cholesterol and fat, it is a natural tendency for humans to eat fat, for example. So the brain has a lot of neural stem cells ready to repair. And what it needs is the right combination of the peptides and the growth factor. And from this started more research about how are these stem cells fed. And like I just mentioned to you, hundreds of papers have been written on the fibroblast growth factor, and it turns out that if you put in vitro stem cells and you put the fibroblast growth factor, basic fibroblast growth factor, the stem cells really nourish. And on top of that, if there are the short peptides, the right type of peptides, the stem cells nourish into and multiply, and they can cultivate these stem cells. So fibroblast growth factor 2 has really become a product for the stem cell industry to either preserve or grow stem cells in their petri dishes. So given all this scenario, there was not much of a holistic view on what really goes on in explaining the effects and the positive results that people are having. We've had, as you probably know, a lot of positive things about, especially about mostly mental and neural functions. And that was what the formulation of LamiNine, the inventor or the formulator, Winston Soyanto, had this in mind, that, okay, we have a basic structure. We have a structure that works. Now, is that structure suitable for all of the amino acids that the brain needs? Perhaps not, because chicken really doesn't go around in a traffic jam, or doesn't have a mean boss, or doesn't get exposed to such stressful factors. And so a lot of the stress-related incidents cause, for example, release of cortisol. Cortisol increases the sugar level in your bloodstream. And if the stress is relieved and the balance is upset, you start gaining weight. So a lot of the weight gain is because of modern day weight gain, could be because of cortisol. So he added more neurotransmitter type of amino acids to this, for lack of a better word, a locomotive that makes it to the brain. So that's what the formulation is. It's not just the 9-day-old fertilized incubated chicken egg. It's enhanced to treat the brain as the modern brain, as what it really, where it needs a little bit more help in the neurotransmitter functions, because he's enriched it with glycine and other amino acids which are very potent, because we know the train's going there. So the best way I can describe this, I remember while doing some work for an earthquake zone back in my native country. It's out in the Himalayas. It was a very narrow valley, and there was a bridge that had been destroyed by falling rocks from a cliff. And so it was very interesting to see how, with the lack of resources, people addressed that issue. They were trying to build the bridge, rebuild the bridge, and the rocks would keep falling and keep destroying the bridge. And so some people suggested, well, why don't we just bring a whole new bridge? This wasn't a very big bridge, but so why don't we just bring a big bridge and just stick it there? Well, the valleys were too narrow, so the big bridge couldn't go there. So we had to bring it into small pieces. And you know, all bridges are built with small pieces of wood, nails, trusses, whatever you call it. So if you can just imagine, on the other side of the bridge was another village and hundreds of villages. On this side of the bridge is where most of the food and supplies were coming. So if you can just imagine this side of the bridge being like your neuron, your brain, and it's trying to send out signals. Now, the neuron has, for receiving and sending, things, little tentacles called dendrites and axons. One is for receiving, one is for sending. These dendrites and axons get damaged, and they get damaged because of mutant genes from the DNA, the proteins that are supposed to come down and keep everything in check in your body. Sometimes you get mutant genes, and that could be degenerative because of hereditary disease or acquired disease. That's not very well known. But if the RNA gives a signal, and 0.01% of the number of proteins that are coming down with the signal are not exactly what needs to be, they become deposits on the brain, and therefore they cause plaques and lesions, and then on these neurons, from these neurons to the endocrine system where your hormones are released to take care of all your bodily functions. Now you can just put if you can put this picture where I just described the bridge, if the falling rocks were to be the degenerative or the mutant genes or proteins which are preventing the body from building this bridge back so the supply chain can be maintained. Even when I saw these guys, even when they had all the materials, they were all happy because it was an earthquake zone. There were not many organizations, so they were trying to build, and the bridge was just not happening. And then they said, well, let's get some contractor or an architect in who can organize this. Well, here comes this one guy. The first thing he does is he tries to put a ledge or something similar to stop the rocks from hitting and destroying the bridge. So this was one function that even in the fibroblast growth factor has been discovered, that it actually destroys the mutant genes, especially in Alzheimer's and Huntington's disease. And it is a very powerful, several powerful research papers that I read that suggest that the stem cells are there at the brain. We just need a growth factor to tell the stem cells to take the form of this particular neuron or genes that as a neurotransmitter that to take back the function. So if you can just imagine what was happening, if I did take the bridge story back, on this side we have the impulse, for example, the neuron, but the neuron can't transmit the message across the bridge. Well, a lot of materials are there. A full material cannot come in. If you think of it as a big peptide, it cannot transport across your intestine. So only small peptides can. So, okay, so you say, okay, here's all the wood and the screws and the bolts and all, but these people didn't know where to put what until the architect came. And that architect, I believe, is what would be the function of this fibroblast growth factor. He first comes in and says, well, first thing you got to do is stop those rocks from destroying this bridge, this connection between in your brains and neurons and your endocrine system. So first he stopped that. So, and that's what fibroblast growth factor does in your body, is it destroys those mutant proteins. Secondly, what it does is it acts as the architect. It says, okay, this truss goes here, this bolt goes there, and tells the little guys, the materials are all there. The amino acids are all there. The amino acids can be there from the thousands of bottles that you find at your nutrition supply stores. It's the nutritional business is nutritional supplement business is a big business, and all these things are there, but they're not there in the right combination. They're not there in the right form, or there's nothing guiding them on where to put everything, because fibroblast growth factor is not very common in adults. It's only there in the human placenta, and so once the embryo is developed, if we don't see much of it in the human bloodstream. So this is just to give that analogy, to build the responses back, to build the bridge back. It takes a lot more than one of the things. If the architect came there with no peptides, no short peptides, he wouldn't be able to build the bridge. If the architect didn't have the ability to stop the destruction, he wouldn't be able to build the bridge. If the materials were not there, he wouldn't be able to build the bridge. And therefore, we believe that we still believe, in fact, that there might be even further unknown things into this material that we extract from the 9-day-old chicken egg that science might discover several years from now. And we're in good shape because we haven't really formulated anything. Now, to take the analogy a little further, if there was at the bridge, and there wasn't in the instance that I described, But if there was at the bridge, if there was a particular spot that was infested or had too much water or a particular tick or a flea, well then it would be nice to, in those peptides, have an extra bit of water-resistant wood or flea-resistant wood, and that's what the LamiNine formulation has done. It takes it from, there might be thousands of companies after we make this more popular, it might become a fashion to just take a 9-day-old chicken egg and make a product out of it. But that's just the foundation. Knowing that it's a small peptides and it has a director, architect, whatever on board to add the right peptides, add the right amino acids to it to make it a complete product for the modern day bridge or the modern day brain or the modern day effects that we get from our stress is what these folks have done. And so what my research has showed me is that on an overall holistic basis, it may not be all the amino acids that your body needs every day, but they are in the critical formulation, they are in the critical balance, and they come with the right ingredients to go to work right away. And if there are other amino acids that your body is, and there are, if you eat meat, eventually the protein gets broken up into small peptides and they get transported towards your brain. If the right amino acids are there, the LamiNine product gives a much better probability of putting them to work rather than just letting them go to waste. I hope this explains. Some of you who are watching this are probably experiencing the positive benefits of LamiNine already. I hope it explains some of the things that you might have been a little confused about. You might have been wondering why, if I just take arginine, it doesn't do the same thing as LamiNine, which in a step-by-step process makes arginine and makes your blood flow better with nitrous oxide production. And there is a technical paper that I've written, and I believe it will be available for everybody in a more simplified manner to explain these. And in that paper we have taken each and every benefit or each and every criteria that people have come to us with lowering of blood pressure or Alzheimer's, dementia issues that have been solved, diabetes and cortisol, weight gain, many things that you folks have come to us and said, I feel this, I don't understand why. And some have been skeptical, some have been just blind faith or whatever, but what I was tasked to do was put a technical explanation, something real next to these testimonials, because quite honestly a lot of testimonials are out there from a lot of marketing companies, but the testimonials need to be backed by possible mechanisms, and that's what we have found. And I for one believe that there is definitely a complete holistic approach in this product for your well-being. Thank you very much.